Welcome to Beyond the Summit, Trinity College's podcast that looks at accomplished alumni and asks them how they became who they are. Welcome to our third season, talking with alumni whose post-college careers have involved working or volunteering in the sports world. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan, Trinity class of 1995. With me today is Oded Carmi, class of 2005. He was a wrestler for his 4 years at Trinity in the 174, 184, and 197 weight classes. He had at least 15 wins, which is a line for a good career as a college wrestler. After graduating, Oded formed DN Van Lines, which is a moving company with locations in Massachusetts, Virginia, and Florida, but whose main line of business is as a contractor for the Department of Defense. An active business leader in Boston, Oded was appointed last year to the Massachusetts State Athletic Commission. The commission regulates, licenses, and sanctions all amateur and professional combat sport events in the state, including boxing, Muay Thai, and mixed martial arts, more commonly known as MMA. Welcome to Beyond the Summit, Oded. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Paul. And I guess I'll do one correction, just so everybody knows. 50 wins, 5-0. 15 would have been a pretty bad career. So.
Oh, wait, I said 50? I said 15?
Well, you may have. I just want to make sure it's clear.
Definitely 50. Good. Well, let's start there. I mean, how did you start wrestling? How old were you when you got into wrestling? Tell me about how that became a passion for you in your life.
So, a lot of people that are in the wrestling community started really early on. There's a lot of really great youth programs that you start in middle school, even some people in elementary school. But I got to wrestling really late in my career, or my high school career. I was a soccer player, not a great soccer player. And, I was having a hard time making it like past JV. So I had a couple of friends who were on the wrestling team and they said, Oded, why don't you try it? And I started as a sophomore in the middle of the year. And, I wasn't a very good wrestler my sophomore year, but I got a real taste for it. And I started working really hard and going off-season tournaments and training my body, getting into weightlifting and things of that nature. And by the end of my high school career, I was a very good high school wrestler.
Did you have older brothers who helped you train, or how did you get, so good so quickly? Because you're growing up in Framingham, Massachusetts?
Framingham, Massachusetts.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
No, I'm the oldest of three, and both of my younger siblings are my sisters. So no help there. It was more of a type of thing of just getting, wrestling is it's a passion sport. You don't do it for glory. There's no like professional wrestling outside of like WWE, which isn't really, close to the wrestling that we do. So it was just something that I really sunk myself into. And I think that's a career, or not a career really, a personal trait of mine is when I get into something, I get into it like really deeply. And so I ate and breathed and slept wrestling for, those 2.5 years. And that's really how I got good at it, I guess.
Yeah. And then were you going all over Massachusetts to wrestle at the state level beyond just the local?
Well, all over New England for summer tournaments and summer classes. And then, New England's in my senior year, which I wrestled at. And so there's quite a lot of traveling. I was on an AAU team where we went down to Florida. So quite a bit of traveling for it. I really got into it. And luckily my parents really supported me.
Yeah. So with that background and growing up in Massachusetts, I mean, what interests you in Trinity? What brought you to the college as you were wrapping up your high school?
Well, and that's kind of what I was getting into, is that the first list, when I started looking at colleges, they said, listen, I want a school that has a wrestling program, because I want to wrestle in college. And for various different reasons, that really limited the pool of potential schools, because not every school has a wrestling program. I'm close with my family. I wanted to be close enough to see them occasionally, but I didn't want to be living at home or have my parents be able to drop in on me at any moment. So Trinity, being about an hour and a half from where I live, was a great distance. And then really, it was the college tours. When I went to Trinity and I saw, the campus, and I did like a wrestling, I stayed overnight with some of the seniors who were wrestlers there. And after I did all my college tours, I just knew it. I said, Trinity is where I want to go. I'll be honest with you, I got into a lot of very highly ranked schools because I had really good SAT scores. But at the end of the day, it didn't matter. I wanted to go to Trinity, and so that's where I had my heart set on it. And when I got the the letter that said that had been accepted, that there wasn't any question about it.
Yeah. Well, we were talking off mic before we started this, and you were talking about the wrestling coach at Trinity who was there when you were a wrestler and took a hiatus and is now back. Tell me a little bit about him and his influence on you as a wrestler, but also as a young man.
Sebi Amato. So Sebi Amato was my coach. And what can I say about Sebi? Sebi had a very, very interesting coaching style. You get a lot of tough love coaches that would, push you really hard and kind of like, wrestling is a tough sport. So, but Sebi had a very different angle. He was your friend, right? And you didn't work hard because you felt Sebi, demanded that of you. You did that because you wanted Sebi to be proud of you. I mean, it was almost like a parental figure to me. And when I came to Trinity was already a really good program. We had a bunch of All-Americans. I think we won New England's the year prior. So I think that was 2000, year 2000. And so when I joined, I'm not sure of the class. If I graded in 05, what would have been my first year? 2001? Is that how it works, or is it 02 and then it keeps on going?
Yeah, you would have been there in the fall of 2001.
Right. So, I already walked into a really great situation. So Sebi's got a style, it's things build with him. So when he, starts coaching a team, every year the team seems to get better. And so Sebi, like you mentioned, a few years ago, I want to say 2 or 3, came back to the Trinity program. And what we're seeing now is very similar to what we saw back then, which is a team that is getting better every year. Yeah, and this year they look like they might have a positive win record, which is really impressive considering where it was a few years back. But one thing I'll tell you about Sebi as well is that it wasn't like once I graduated from Trinity, our relationship was over. Sebi texts and emails and calls and visits his wrestlers, his family all the time. Sebi was at my wedding. He's just like a friend at this point. He's not just a former coach, even though you always refer to your coach as coach, right? Whenever I pick up the phone, it's like, how you doing, coach? Right. But yeah, he's just like, I would say, a really good person and somebody that you want to do. You want to impress, you want to perform. And to this day, like when Sebi calls and we need help fundraising for Trinity Wrestling, like you want to do it for Sebi. Like it's not like you feel like you're being forced into it in any way. So just a really great figure. And I'm not the only one that would probably articulate it this way. I think that if you talk with most wrestlers that have wrestled for Sebi, they would tell you the same thing.
One of the I've been fortunate in my career as a journalist to interview a lot of athletes, and they all talk about making the leap to the next level, and this is regardless of the sport, and guys who end up making it to the NFL and all of this. What if you were a great high school wrestler? So tell me about what that transition was like from high school to, I don't want to say starting lower, but really being at the bottom. Being a freshman coming into Trinity. What was that transition like, and how did the team make you feel comfortable and manage you into the wrestling program at Trinity?
Yeah, the way I would say it is humbling. I mean, you come from, you're at the top, at least for me in my high school wrestling career. Like I was really at the top. I was captain of my team. I placed in all the tournaments, sectional, states, all states. Didn't place New England's, but had a good New England's run there. And so, I came to Trinity expecting that I would be like, top dog. I'd get there and, I'd start, winning matches from day one. And it wasn't like that. It's like going up to the upper echelon, right? Only the good wrestlers decided to wrestle in college. So it's kind of like going from being a D1 football player to the NFL. You're just in a new class. And it took me a while to figure myself out. But I will tell you this, my first few tournaments at Trinity, I did really well. Probably exceeded both my coaches and my expectations. And so I think the later part of that season was a little bit of rude awakening when I faced some adversity and wasn't winning everything. But I will tell you that the camaraderie, that not just the coaches but the wrestlers themselves, it was a family. They took care of you. If you were down, they'd pick you up. We did a lot of our own preseason and postseason training. So without the coach, right? Like we would just the team would get together and say, hey, we're gonna go for a run. We're gonna do some weightlifting. And and really, my closest friends, even to this day, are people that were on my wrestling team. So yeah, it was a little bit of a rude awakening. But I think for unless you're really a generational athlete in your sport, when you take that next level from high school to college, you kind of get a little bit of hey, maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. You have a lot of work to put in before you're going to reach that level that you were in high school.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit outside wrestling at Trinity. Tell me a bit about, what you loved academically. So what was your major when you were at Trinity?
So I was classics, so Greek and Roman history and Latin, classic
Just trying to keep it all connected to wrestling. Is that it? You just kind of go back to the Greek
like
origins of the
Roman,
sport?
right? Not exactly. Just I really had this belief of a liberal arts education where I wasn't really focusing on what I was going to do after school. I just wanted to focus on something that I liked. And I always loved history. I loved languages because I myself was born in Israel. I lived in Israel until I was 7 years old. So my first language was Hebrew, right? I took Spanish really seriously in high school. So I was pretty decent at Spanish. So I loved languages, and really Latin is really the foundation of most Romance languages. And so it was just something that I loved, and I just said to follow my passion. And as you can imagine, in your intro, you said that opera transportation, a moving company, that can be further away from classics, right? But it's just what I loved.
I gotta ask you this though. Did you trash talk your opponents on the mat in Latin? Is that something
I
you
did
did?
not trash, and I did not trash talk my opponents in Latin, but sportsmanship is another thing that Sebi was really, really big on. So we were, I think, always the team that treated our opponents well. And if you didn't shake your opponent's hand after a match or after the close of the entire dual meet, you'd be talking to Sebi about it, because I think, especially at Trinity, I think we hold ourselves to a really high standard. So no trash talking whatsoever.
But Latin would be pretty impressive.
That way they wouldn't even know I was trash talking.
They wouldn't even know what you were saying.
Exactly.
Unless you're wrestling like a pre-med student on the other team. Otherwise,
that's true.
Beyond Sebi Amato as your wrestling coach, who are some of the other professors who stood out for you, or some of the other classes that stood out for you that you still think about 15 some odd years later?
Well, on the classic side, Rene Block. Rene Block was he wasn't a tenured professor. So he was at Trinity, I think, really during my career. I believe he was Swiss in his background, and he'll probably listen to this and yell at me. Maybe it's not Switzerland, maybe it's Belgium, but a European country. And by the way, which have the strongest traditions for classics, Germany, and those countries. And he was also Jewish, and I was Jewish. And so I really took a liking into obviously there's the Judea. Back during the time, there's a lot of history related to the Romans and the Greeks. So he just really let me explore my passion. I wrote all types of different reports about Jewish history during that time. And he really supported me, and he's just a guy that I really respected. And he's another guy that maybe not quite as much as Sebi, but I stayed in touch with for some years after college. So he was a great role model for me, and somebody that really just let me follow my passion. And another Professor Kiner, who was again in Jewish studies, who did some Jewish mysticism courses with him, and that was kind of cool. He was like a very laid back, I wouldn't necessarily say hippie, but on that general like side of things. And me and him got really along. And every time that I come back from homecoming, I always check in with him. So those are two guys, and I think what you're kind of seeing here, whether it came to wrestling or to classics or anything, is that I really try not to make decisions on what is, let's say, best for me financially or otherwise. It's really more about what I'm interested in, what I love to do. And those are some people: Sebi, Professor Kiner, Renee Block, Professor Block, who really just let me run with that. And I really appreciate it.
As your, time was sort of, running out at Trinity, you get to be your, senior year, your classics major, you're a wrestler. What were you thinking that you might want to do after college? What were some of the thoughts that you had then? Like, I'm going to be done here in the spring. I wonder what I'm going to do next.
Paul, absolutely no clue. I mean, I really mean it. And in fact, I tried to. So I was lucky enough that that I didn't leave college with any debt. And so there was a point in my senior career where, I had friends with a lot of underclassmen, and I lobbied my parents really hard to give me a fifth year, the super senior year. Like, I really want to say Trinity, I love my time there. And they were like, absolutely not. Like, no way, not happening. And so I kind of like, all right, well, that's how it's going to be. And so, I mean, I can kind of weave into how kind of I started in my business, and kind of tell you how that all happened. And that really relates to your question, is that when I graduated from college, just like a lot of people do, you live at your parents' house, right? I mean, it's the first place you go, you graduate, and you don't have an apartment or a house yet. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so the place that you went to look for jobs back then was Craigslist. And so my first job out of college was working for Kaplan. And like I told you, I had really good SAT scores. So in order to work for Kaplan, you have to have be in a certain percentile. And I taught SAT classes, and I worked in their Waltham Center doing some management duties. And I was there for 6 months. And after 6 months, I really, again, poured myself into it. And I saw that I was like a small cog in a really big system. So I said, you know what, like, this isn't for me. I could probably work here 20 years. I'm not really going to change my position. So I went back home, and I went back to Craigslist, and I said, listen, I don't care if I find a job that's shoveling dirt from one end of the highway to the other. If it pays more money and it's closer to home, I'm going to do it. So I found
this is like an Adam Sandler skit, like when he used to do the toll guy in Massachusetts, like shoveling dirt from one end to the other.
I would have done it. I'm telling you, it would have paid me more than, and I won't talk specific numbers, but let's say that it wasn't a high number that I was starting out from. So I found an ad on Craigslist, which is like manager of a moving company, and it was right in our town in Framingham. So I go there, and it's a guy, and it's a small basement office. They had one rented truck and three guys that worked there. He's like, I'm going to pay you a certain amount. I'll go with the number specific. I'm going to pay you $49,000 a year, but I can't pay you at that level immediately. I will pay you more in the second half of the year. So by the end of the year, you will have made $49,000. I'm like, okay, like, I'm a young, naive, person. I'm like, sounds great. Let's do it. So again, after 6 months there, I probably was paid around $10,000 in total. So I go to the person, say, listen, like, if I'm going to make $49,000 by the end of the year, you're going to have to pay me like at $100,000 level for the rest of the year. And the person said, well, you know what, let me be honest with you, things aren't, financially working out for me. I had a lot of children, a lot of different things outside. I really can't, like, not going to happen. And I'm like, okay, I'm not like a litigious person.
Wait. So tell me, this is when you broke out the Latin and your wrestling moves and you took the guy down.
I tied him into a pretzel. No, I'm kidding. I took it really well. I said, you know what? I looked at the value of the experience. I understood a little bit of the industry, and I just decided that I was going to go off on my own and start my own company. And funny kind of inside joke inside my with my parents, I guess, my family, is that I sat down with my father, who had like a engineering and financial background, and I told him, hey, I'm going to start this moving company. And his response to me was, I didn't put you through college so you could be a mover. And I laughed at him, and I said, great, thanks for the advice. I'm doing what I want anyways. And I started and really bootstrapped it, and grew it to now we have, multiple locations in Massachusetts and Florida and Virginia. And we have, now over 200 employees and close to 70 trucks on the road. So, we're a pretty well established company. And again, following my passion, right? Just not knowing what I was going to do, but really putting a lot of faith in my own personal characteristics and working hard, thinking that I'm a capable person, and all, my time in Trinity was what gave me those tools, that confidence, that self-assuredness, to know that I could be successful no matter what I, put my time and heart into. And so if you're currently, looking, you're about to graduate or you're thinking about what major to choose, my advice for you is, again, follow your heart. Don't worry about, getting in a career path right now. You'll never know what you're going to do until you graduate. And it's whatever opportunities come your way. And so, yeah, it was definitely something I couldn't have predicted when I was at Trinity.
Yeah. Where'd the name come from? The DN of DN.
It's
Van.
Direct National. There's actually a national van lines, a very big company, and so I actually know the president of that company very well. He's one of my friends, and we just didn't want to conflict with name recognition. Just again, sportsmanship, and being kind to our competitors.
Yeah, yeah. Now you live in Boston now, correct? I think I read in your bio in the Beacon Hill neighborhood.
In Beacon Hill with my wife Lauren and my son David.
Yeah. How old's your son?
He's 3.5.
3.5. That's awesome.
Fun age.
The company is based in Boston, or it's based
Northborough, Massachusetts. That's where we're headquartered. I'm sitting at our headquarters right now.
Yeah. When you think about, we're going to get to the State Athletic Commission in a second, but when you think about what you had to do, to grow that business from one truck to 70, and probably, you doing a lot of the moving with a couple other people to 200 people, and you running the company, what were some of the things, some of the lessons that you learned at Trinity that really helped you succeed to really grow that company into a real business?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And I'll tell you this. So you said actually moving. So I actually very early on decided that if I wanted to work on the business, I couldn't really work on the trucks, because when you start out and you're the only office worker, you can't do, sales and marketing while performing the work. So I actually never was really on the trucks. I from day one, I decided if I wanted to build a business, I had to, hire and employ the right people and grow a big support staff, which I've done over the years, thankfully. I mean, a lot of it came from wrestling, to be honest with you. Tenacity, confidence. Things don't always go your way in business, and the ability to rebound and to pick yourself back up, to learn from your mistakes. That's something that I learned in wrestling. I mean, handle disappointment, right? Like a lot of us, when we have something that's really disappointing, it demotivates us. And from wrestling, I learned that when you have a disappointment, you use that for motivation. So I would say that's one thing. I will tell you another thing is networking, right? And I learned that at Trinity, really, how to, I was in a fraternity, Alpha Chi Rho. I went abroad to the University of Sydney. So I put myself in honest situations where I didn't know a lot of people, and I had to be outgoing, and I had to reach out to people and form relationships. And I would tell you that the single largest reason why our company has been successful is through networking and developing a relationship with other big corporate players. And so I'm on the executive committee for our international trade association, our national trade association. I'm the incoming president for our state association. So your competitors are also your biggest allies. And in this particular industry, there's a lot of work that you can do together. So, that cooperative networking is something that I learned at Trinity as well.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly, your business, you have a particular niche in sort of doing a lot of work for the Department of Defense. So
Yes.
how did that come about to decide to, focus on an area where surely you need to have, great expertise. You're probably moving, stuff that's very sensitive at times, but you're working with a large government organization. How did you develop that expertise, and how did you decide that was a route you wanted to take?
Yeah, sure, Paul. I'll give you a little bit of background. So we're still moving household goods, which is, the items that are in your home. It's through the Defense Personal Property Program, and everything in military is acronyms. So if I get into acronyms and it stop me, and I'll explain it. So Defense Personal Property Program is DP3. And basically, when you're a service member in our nation's military, the military will move you every 2 or 3 years to a new base. It's called PCS, Permanent Change of Station. And so part of being a service member is your entitlements. And one of your entitlements is moving. The military pays for your move and coordinates your move. So they have TSPs, transportation service providers, that are in a closed system, right? So it's very hard to get into military moving. And we're the ones that perform all the work. And I got into it by, again, networking. And there was a particular person at a company that was in the West Coast, and this was their main line of business. And so I learned a lot from them. And when there was finally an opportunity to really buy into, you have to almost buy these contracts, SCAT codes, as we call them in the military. To do that, I took that risk. And, it went from being 10% of our business to 20 to 30 to now it's probably about 70% of our business. So it's a big chunk of it. And it's really rewarding because in addition to obviously doing good business, you're actually providing a really important service and supporting our country, right? We're under the United States Transportation Command, and we are supporting the mobility of our nation's troops. So it gives me a cool feeling.
Yeah, that's excellent. Let's pivot and talk about your role in sports. Tell me a bit about the Massachusetts State Athletic Commission, and then how your appointment to that commission came about.
Right. So you gave a really good and apt description in your intro. So the Massachusetts State Athletic Commission, we govern all the combat sport events, fighters, officials in the state of Massachusetts in three main areas: mixed martial arts, MMA, boxing, and Muay Thai. Muay Thai is basically kickboxing. And so I'll kind of come back into the story. And so, I have my wrestling background. As I told you, I love to network. I'm involved with all these trade associations. And I started getting politically involved. Particularly, there's our current governor of the Commonwealth, Charlie Baker, was a political figure, very much like myself, a moderate that I greatly supported. And through, business ties and personal ties, started getting closer to his office and going to different events and spending some time with him and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito. And then when the time came where there was a potential for me to be appointed to a board or commission, we really looked at what the possibilities are. And because of my wrestling background, the State Athletic Commission was really where my heart was at. And so I was appointed, like you said, about 8 months ago to that commission, and hopefully reappointed this month again for a 3-year term. And it's really exciting that the difference between us and most boards and commission is like if you're, let's say, on the gaming commission, right? You're licensing and governing, casinos, right? Well, we actually have like events like every weekend, right? And I was just on Saturday, Cage Titans, a big MMA event. And we're the commissioners, so we have to go there, and actually we have like a big, like a state trooper badge and all kind of our credentials, and we're there to make sure that the fighters are safe, that the rules are followed. We can disqualify or change outcomes of bouts. It's a big position. I take it very seriously, but it's also very rewarding. It's something that this is not a paid position. It actually used to be stipends back in the day, but not anymore. It's a volunteer position. It's a government position, but you only do it for the love of the sport. And so that's why I'm there every weekend.
Yeah. And is it every weekend? Is it events all over the state that you're going to?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's more. We have an event on St. Patty's Day in Encore, one of their casinos over here in Boston. It's all the time. And I will tell you this, there are 4 commissioners appointed by the governor. Now, we like to have at least 1 or 2 commissioners at every event. So there is a little bit of, respite. If, for example, I won't be here this weekend, another commissioner will be at that event, but we have to cover all of them. So yeah, it's a big time commitment.
When you think about what you've learned in your first year of being a commissioner, what really stands out to you?
What I've seen out to you, and this might not be such a positive thing, is that, I came in to the commission, as a business leader, right? So it's like, like, give me a budget, give me our income, let's make some decision, let's act very quickly. And it's like, whoa, this is government. It does not work like that. I'll give you an example. We have deputy commissioners, and deputy commissioners are really the ones that, we usually have anywhere between 5 to 10 at each event. They're watching how the fighters, their hands are getting wrapped, they're escorting them. They're really, making sure that all of our rules and regs are being followed. And right now, we are only by mass general law allowed to pay them $75 for an event. And these events are sometimes 8 to 10 hours long. So, my first priority was, let's get better compensation for our deputies so we can have more and better deputies. And just getting that across the finish line has been like, pulling teeth. We're not even there yet. So I think I learned a lot that government there's a lot more procedure. There's a lot more politics. There's a lot more work to put in before you can affect an outcome. It's not just like, being in a business environment where it's like, okay, we're going to make this decision and we're going to do it now. So that's one thing I've learned for sure.
Yeah. And you said, hopefully next month you get reappointed. And if that happens, what would your goals be for a full term? What would you like to accomplish and have be your legacy as a commissioner?
I'd say the deputy pay is definitely one of them. I think that just getting a bit more structure, putting in that business structure for the athletic commission, for future commissioners, for the fighters and all of our officials. I'd like to get some more regular training events that occur, fund them, make sure they're properly scheduled, and just create a little bit more of organization within the commission. Coming from, again, a business background, I'm used to kind of things being organized, and so that's where I'm paying a lot of my attention to. But I will tell you, our chair Paul Carger and one of my really good friends Brian Lambert are also commissioners, and they're right in lockstep with me. So I think that you're going to see the next 3 years as being a transformative time for the State Athletic Commission.
Yeah, that's been wonderful. One last question before we go to a little quirky thing we do at the end here. But when you're if you were talking to a current Trinity student now, or one who's just started his or her career, and that man or woman was an athlete at Trinity and they really love their sport, what advice would you give to that student who is looking to either work in the sports world or to do what you've done, kind of a hybrid, have a a business career, a career doing something else, but still being able to be in the sports world and to give back? What advice would you give to that student or recent graduate?
Paul, I have a lot of experience in this because I have a few friends, especially one of them who's currently a pretty high executive at the NFL, which is a reason why I'll be in LA next week for the Super Bowl. I go every year because of him, because of my good friend. And he didn't start in the NFL. He started in NASCAR. That was his first job. He worked for a driver and kind of worked his way up. And I've seen that there's been a couple of examples. So very similar to my classics, and like, you don't know what you're going to do. If you want to be in the field of sports, whether as an agent or as a promoter or whatever it may be, if you want to be in football or if you want to be in soccer or whatever it is, you take any opportunity that you can find in the sports world, and they often translate to each other. You network, you meet the right people, and you might start NASCAR and be in the NFL, or start the NFL and be in NASCAR. But the whole idea is, don't pigeonhole, only wait for opportunities that are in the specific sport that you're looking to get into. I've seen a lot of people be very successful in transition from one sport to another.
That's great. Thanks, Oded. Now, we're going to do something here at the end. We call this the Beyond the Summit Fast Five. Self-explanatory. Okay. 5 questions asked quickly. The only rule is don't think, just answer.
Okay.
All right. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. Number 1, what did you want to be the day you arrived at Trinity?
I wanted to be an astronaut. Not kidding.
I like that. Number 2, what's one thing that happened at Trinity that your colleagues or fellow commissioners never knew about you?
When my freshman year, I got into a bar fight with the football team, and it wasn't a very big bar fight, but we all handled it very honorably and made sure that nobody got in trouble. And those people became very good friends later on in my college career. So it's something that very few people know about.
That's crying out for a follow-up question, but then I'd be breaking my own rules, so I'm not going to ask it. Number 3. When you look back on the narrative of your life, was there a moment at Trinity that was instrumental in you becoming who you are today?
Yeah, I think it was actually when I came back from my semester abroad at Sydney. And again, I'd become a pretty good wrestler, and I'd taken like 6 months off for even thinking of wrestling. And I got a rude awakening that showed me that, hey, if you don't put in the hard work, don't expect results. So I very quickly learned that, yeah, you got to keep it up if you want to be good.
I love it. I can imagine all the beer, all the shrimp and everything in Australia.
I came back and I got wiped on the mat. I mean, I lost probably like 10 matches in a row. So yeah, I learned very quickly, you can't just expect, to be successful if you don't put in the time.
All right. Now, number 4, you already answered this in a different form, but sometimes people just skip to the end. So number 4, what advice would you give to a current Trinity student who aspires to use his or her sports background after college?
Well, so here's what I will tell you. You don't have to be a great athlete to have a great career in athletics. In fact, some of the people that I've seen have the greatest, become coaches of either professional teams or college teams. We're very average athletes. So don't let the fact that you weren't, a superstar, an All-American in college, stem your dreams for having a career in the sports world.
Great. And number 5, if the Trinity Bantam, our beloved mascot, the fighting chicken, had been one of your trusted advisors, what role would the bird play?
So the bird is a boxer technically. So I don't think that he would have had a lot of advice on the wrestling front. But again, going back to, if you don't have to be the greatest, the bantam isn't the biggest, animal in the animal kingdom. He's a little bird, but he's got a lot of attitude, right? So I would say, listen, believe in yourself, have confidence. That's what the bantam would tell you to do.
I love that. A little bird with a lot of attitude. Oded, Carmi, class of 2005, thank you so much for joining me on Trinity's Beyond the Summit podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Will.
This episode of Beyond the Summit was brought to you by the Trinity College Office of Communications. Special thanks to Caroline DeVoe, Ellen Buckhorn, and Mary Mahoney for production assistance. This episode was produced by Helder Mira.
A big thank you to Paul Sullivan, our alumnus host. The theme music, Winter in Liverpool by Mulaha, licensed by MusicBed. Thanks for listening and tune in next time.